what I'll do is I'll start with a bit of background stuff. So the system will come with with default settings essentially, and I just want to give you an idea of how it's put together. So this is really, I'm logged in as an administrator. Obviously, you can set up different workshops, both internal and external, and I'll just click on one, for example. It allows you to set up, obviously, attributes for the workshop. You'll see the field there, notify. Whoever's name you put in there, it really becomes the default for any alerts or notifications. So if someone opens a work request or a daily driver's check sheet that's assigned, that is associated with Childers Workshop, I'll automatically get an email. So whoever's on that notification list will get an email or an alert. It also has any related employees to that workshop and allows you to set them up and decide if they're available for work or not, which really means can you assign them for work to that location. And it also shows, if you want to use the inventory module, any inventory that you have at that specific location. So as I say, this is just setup sort of stuff. With our assets, this is probably something unique. So from the back end, each type of asset has its own asset template, and all the fields in that template are tailored towards that asset type. As far as the front end and the user knows, they don't know any different. They just choose an asset and they won't really see any of this stuff. But what that means is, particularly on a mobile device, you'll have very few, if any, empty fields in your asset register. So all the fields for a backhoe loader, for example, are very specific to a backhoe loader, and similar with a brush cutter, etc. I won't spend too much time there. So once again, in the background for setup, this is our service and repair section. So this is a list of the questions that you would ask on a PM service, for example, and this is really the master list. So we've set them up by categories, and those categories also match our repair types. And as you can see, these are all defaults here, but similarly, you can add and delete as many of these as you like. So, and once I go through, it'll make a bit more sense as to when we set the asset up specifically. Daily drivers. So we have the ability to have electronic daily drivers check sheets. Similar again, this is really in the background for setup reasons, and they're all set up by category or function of the asset. So what would happen there is if you choose to go electronic, your grader operator will log in, he'll select an asset, and he'll literally go through these daily checks. And if there's no defects, then it just gets signed off, and we keep a record of that in the system. If there's a defect present, it'll automatically create a work request, which will be sent to the workshop. Once again, this is set up, so these can be adjusted or changed, but it comes with this default list out of the box.
Just a quick one on that, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind. Are they prioritised in terms of the seriousness of the defect?
Okay, so the priority at this point in time is basically two fields, two selections. So asset is operational, non-urgent, or asset is non-operational, urgent. But look, given the system is very flexible, so it can be set up within reason any way you want it to be. That's a fairly simple change. Like I say, these are all sort of default settings. What we're finding is that most sites, we all share the same fundamentals, but we also have little differences as well. And this is where the flexibility of the system comes in.
Okay, no, that's fine, mate.
Okay, so are you guys aware of the IPWA maintenance codes? Does that mean anything to you?
Certainly not to me.
Okay, so essentially what it is, it's a defined set of maintenance codes. So repair type, that's any of your main components in a machine, accessories, brakes, transmission, etc. Work completed, what did the mechanic do? Did they add fluid? Did they repair it? Repair reason, was it leaking? Was it squeaking? That type of thing. So what this really enables is if all councils jumped on board with the maintenance codes, then we can all describe the maintenance in the same terms, and ultimately we can all benchmark our maintenance data. At the moment, I see, for example, you might have one mechanic say, I repaired the engine, the next one says he fixed it, the next one says he adjusted it or something. They probably all mean the same thing, but it really offers you no opportunity to benchmark with anyone else. So the maintenance codes are just purely a set of standard maintenance reporting codes. That's all they are. We've probably taken them a step further. So what I'll do is I'll just, now I'll show you something interesting. So these codes, there is 2,759 codes in the background. I know this because I set all these up myself. So, and I'll try and explain now what it is. So if you imagine, I'll just bring up brake. So if you imagine a mechanic chooses a repair type of brakes, that's fine. So it's a brake work order. Then the work completed fields will only show up that are applicable to brakes. Okay, so they can't put something like for brakes pumped up the tyre because it just doesn't make sense. So what we've been able to do is we've been able to match each of these codes against one another. So the work completed codes are applicable to the brakes. Once they choose add fluid, then the repair reason codes will only be applicable to add fluid, and same with the repair cause. What that really does is it drives clean data in the background, and it almost gives no opportunity for the mechanic to choose the wrong maintenance code. So we're really driving them in the direction to choose the correct codes. There is still a little bit of risk there that they don't choose the correct one in that sequence. But what we're finding is that we're getting a really nice clean set of data out the other end because of these codes. Now, obviously this is in the background and it may look quite complicated, but once again, in the front end, the user sees none of this and he's just presented with a set of codes and they just select from a drop-down list. And I'll show you that as we go on. Okay, so just once again, these are our repair types. This is setup information in the back, and we also have the ability to add questionnaires to a repair type. I'll open up the brake one just as an example. So when you choose a brake work order, you also have the opportunity to have a brake inspection. If you want to choose this, the mechanic can then they can then run it across the brake meter, pass or fail, and they can also record the thickness of the brake pads left per axle. Now this is, once again, this is default, but you can add or subtract as many maintenance questionnaires as you like.
Yep.
Quite a simple setup. Okay. Let's go back. Okay, this is where, so this is really now, we're down to the asset level. So ATV, backhoe, etc. This is in the background. Once again, this is a default set of codes. So what this is doing is saying, for an ATV, we have the associated request, a service request, a repair request, a daily driver's check sheet, an infringement, and the same with the work order. So we're really tailoring everything about the system to the particular asset. Okay, the same with the repair types. You'll see that those repair types there are only applicable to an ATV. So you won't see, for example, you won't see tracks and undercarriage against an ATV because they simply don't, they don't have that on them. And this is, once again, the daily driver's check sheets. These are the applicable daily driver's check sheets tailored towards that ATV. So what I'll do is I'll just open one, it's probably a bit more relevant, a backhoe. Once again, this is in the background, so your operators or your mechanics won't see this. So what we're looking at this here, this is really a setup for a backhoe loader. So you've got multiple options. Really, you can, if this doesn't suit you, then you can either delete them or add them as many times as you like. For example, this one's set up with the diagnose work order. That means that if you want to capture the amount of time that your mechanics are taking to diagnose a repair before they actually repair it, then you can choose a diagnosis work order. I find that quite handy myself for determining, have the mechanics had enough training, do they have the right tooling, etc. But it's not mandatory. You may choose not to use that work order, for example. Once again, the repair types are all set up and they're all applicable to a backhoe loader. So what that means is when the mechanic chooses a work order on a backhoe, they won't be able to choose a repair type that doesn't suit a backhoe. So we've really tried to drive that clean data message in the background. And the same for the daily driver's check sheet. So this is where you would set up the daily driver's check sheets. If you want to add one, you either choose it from the list. I'll just add PDO guard, it probably doesn't suit. And it's as simple as that and saving. Okay, so then you've just added another check to that daily driver's check sheet, as simple as that.
And Andrew, with this, where you've got an asset item that has, something that might be a little out of the ordinary for instance, your backhoe here, can you add that in?
Absolutely.
Or perhaps, hydraulic side shift, whereas you may have others that are full manual side shifts. Can you add,
yes.
a little?
So if you're talking about, so at the moment, the repair types align with the IPWA standards. So it comes out of the box with those. We can definitely add another repair type. That's not an issue. And the same with the daily driver's check sheets. If you wanted to say check I think you said manual side shift, you can simply create a check of manual side shift and select it from the list, and it's there straight away.
Okay, no, that's good.
All right. Okay. If I'm going too fast or you've got questions, just please let me know. So look, these are set up, as I said, for each different asset type, and we also align with the IPWA naming standards. The reason, obviously, I'm wearing two hats. I've got the technical side of the software hat, and I'm also a volunteer for IPWA. One thing we noticed was that all the fleet operations around the country, we might have one that calls a ute, a utility, a tray back, a pickup. There was about 5 or 6 different names, and realistically, none of them were wrong. It was just that we couldn't agree on a standard, and there was no ability to benchmark. So IPWA, we've got together and created a standard naming convention, which is reflected in these here.
Yep.
It follows sort of industry naming standards where possible, or the Civil Contractors Federation for the yellow plant.
Yep.
So I will just go down to your fuel management. Once again, this is probably more of an admin task, but this is where you would upload your fuel data via CSV. So you would upload it into here. Once you upload it, it does a couple of things. It'll tell you, okay, today's successful imports, we're happy with all these line items. There's been no exceptions to the rule. Okay, so it'll list them in there, and any unsuccessful ones, it'll list in this list here. And that, what we do there, it almost puts them to the side so that you don't knowingly import bad data. So it gives you the opportunity to correct them at this point before it comes into the mainstream system. And then, of course, it just provides you a list of your successful imports from there. Probably more of an admin function, but obviously your fuel meter readings drive your PM servicing and your reporting, etc. Look, obviously I won't spend too much time here now, but just things like we can set up customers, suppliers and stores. So stores are really about if you want to set up an inventory either in a workshop or at perhaps a mobile truck, you've got the ability to do that. And once again, it'll show your stock levels on hand, all the typical things of a inventory system there.
Okay, that's good.
Inventory can either be very specific to an asset. It can be for this particular asset ID. It can be just a general inventory item, or it can also be a consumable item or a service-specific item. Very flexible in the way that's set up. Okay. So that's that's probably, I just want to run through that in the background. I think it's important sort of get your head around that. And I'll also show you the work order templates. Within the system, we probably operate slightly differently. We have two components of completing work. One is a work request. That literally means a customer has requested us to do something. That can either come by a defect report from the daily driver's check sheet, or simply they've noticed something as they're driving during the day. They create an electronic work request. We've also got things set up for an internal request. So I talk about two types of labour. One is direct labour. You might call that billable labour. That's any labour the mechanics use that's directly attributable to a planned item or an asset ID. And then we have what we term internal labour. That's any labour that you use for acting supervisor, training, overhead type labour. So whether you have the ability to capture both those types of labour electronically and also report on them via way of timesheet. So this is really background information. Again, these are the types of work orders that we currently have. So an internal task. So, we're going to have training or acting supervisor or whatever you want. We have an accident data collection work order. This is quite an interesting one. So once again, typically someone's had an accident, obviously, but to a particular asset ID. They will complete a work request that they've had an accident. It'll show up in the workshop supervisor. We'll assign it to a workshop. We have the ability there to log time. That's our time recorder that I'm pointing to. So if you don't have to record time against an accident, but if the workshop's going to do something to it, then they can record time against that. All the typical types of things: accident date, driver details, the asset description, cause of the accident, location, etc. This is probably where we get down to the quote stage. So if we click on the quotes are required, it'll drop down a box and give you the opportunity to put in 2 quotes there. If there's no quotes, just untick that box and it'll hide that. You can attach photos or documentation or the accident, whatever you want to attach. The other thing is it manages the accident process. So if I go through here, the driver's manager has signed off, I tick that, it'll date and timestamp that. And so it allows you to manage the whole accident process. So it records date and times, who signed off on it, when they signed off, who's repairing the accident, etc., etc. And then it allows you, if you want to record labour, etc., all that's recorded against an asset as well. So apologies if I'm going a little bit fast. Just pull me up if you want to. Look, the other ones we have things like I explained, the diagnose work order. Once again, that's a choice thing. You don't have to use that. We also have a monitoring work order. If a truck comes in, for example, that has a minor oil leak, so you've noted that as a defect, but it's not bad enough yet that we want to do something about it, you can create a monitoring work order with a scheduled date to book that back in for review. So you might say, look, it's not leaking too bad. We'll review this again in a week's time. That'll show up in the workshop supervisor's calendar, and they'll contact that truck and say, bring it in again, or they'll actually schedule a date at that point. Yeah. We have a parts management work order, and what that allows you to do is that's really about ordering parts for a particular asset. So if you're on a work order and you need to order parts from Caterpillar, Hastings Deering, this is the template to do that. Once again, you assign it to a workshop. It'll be against an asset ID, and then you can simply, it won't let me do it because there's no work request, but you create a new child document. That's an order form. What's the part? Who are you ordering it from? What's the transport arrangements? Etc. And it allows you to manage that parts management work process. Once again, I don't know how you guys work, whether that's applicable or not. Some sites will use that and others won't. Okay, so what I'll do, I've got a couple of assets already open here that I want to go through. So one of them is we have the ability to set up workshop equipment in the system. So things like hoists, tension wrenches, anything of value or anything that needs servicing or calibration or anything like that. It's a very simple form we have. We don't collect a lot of data. So what this enables us to do is obviously capture any hoists, any additional details. We can set up warranties for that particular asset, any sort of purchase and replacement details, any images, etc. Now what this enables you to do is we have daily drivers check sheets against this asset. So what that means is before the mechanics start for the day, they can fill out a daily driver's check sheet assembly, a pre-work inspection on your hoist. It goes through the same checking process, customised to the hoist, you know, are the cables okay, etc., the switch is okay. If everything's okay, it's signed off and there's a report that just notes that it's been completed. If there's any defects, it creates an automatic work request, which is then sent to the workshop supervisor to say, hey, we've got a problem with this and we need to do something about it. So if on this particular asset, they're the particular work requests that are available to it. So you can do a daily driver's check sheet, you can do a repair request or a service request. And I'll just choose the daily driver and we'll create that. So imagine now I'm a mechanic on a tablet or a phone. It would present this sheet to me. So a couple of things. This asset in particular has been allocated to me in the background. So what the system will do as a default will only show me those assets that are allocated to me. It means you don't end up with a big long list and you're trying to search. However, if you're not allocated to a particular asset, it's just a matter of unticking that box, and you'll see that email that just came through in my box. That's just to alert me that someone's created a daily driver's check sheet for this particular asset. Okay. They're all our checks. Now we've set the system up probably a little bit differently to other systems on the market. Instead of us going through and ticking each one of these that we've completed it, we say only tick the ones that have a defect or don't pass inspection. So we've set it up sort of in reverse. We find it's a lot, as long as the mechanics have had, you know, their inductions and proper training, there's an expectation that, you know, they obviously know what they're looking for, etc. And they complete the request, and then as soon as they hit the tick of the defect inspection complete, it date and timestamps the individual and what they did with that inspection. So once again, if there is a defect, we just simply select that there's a fluid defect, for example. We create a description in here, kind of priority. It's out of service. It's in the workshop. We can then attach files, or the system inherits the natural or the phone capabilities of either a phone or a tablet. So imagine you're doing a selfie. Same thing with this system. It inherits the camera's functionality straight into the system. So you just point and shoot, and it automatically downloads it into the system. You don't have to go and save it somewhere and then upload it again. So what happens then, obviously they fill that out, they click the button. It then, because this asset is allocated to the Bundaberg workshop, is the responsible workshop, it then shows up in the Bundaberg workshop supervisor's homepage or dashboard that there's a new request, and then it's up to them to go and do something about it. So I'll just click out of that now. So I'll go back just to a truck. So I've got a truck open here. Once again, we use the IPWA naming standard as a standard. A couple of things. So obviously we have an asset status. But what is the status of the asset? Is it active, disposed, commission or decommission, or waiting disposal? And that provides us a few options, which I'll explain. Is it permanently assigned or is it out of the hire store? So in the Enterprise Edition, we have the ability to have an internal hire store, so people can go and have a look what's available. They can then book that asset in and out, or we can give it on temporary allocation. So the system's very flexible. We've tried to cater for just about every possible scenario in a fleet operation. If you were to click this is a critical asset, that box there, then anytime you open a work request or a work order, it brings up a little warning symbol just to warn the operator, hey, this is a critical asset and you need to pay attention to this one, essentially. You'll notice that the responsible workshop is Bundaberg. That means that any work request that's created by default is automatically assigned to Bundaberg. However, when the operator fills the work request out, he has the option of also clicking off Bundaberg and adding a different workshop or a mobile mechanic, whatever they see fit at that point. And also a responsible person who's the driver of that asset. The rest is probably fairly typical of your usual fleet systems. Fuel details, we have the option there to set up multiple fuel types, trucks with AdBlue or similar like that. Fuel consumption, that's all pretty typical data of a fleet system. All your physical details, once again, this asset template is been tailored to a heavy vehicle. So you'll see very few empty fields in here. So you've got a few options. Obviously, you've got a primary meter. You can also list a secondary meter if you want to do that. All your typical sort of length, width, weight, all those types of things. Here we can also relate assets. So this is really like a parent-child relationship. So if this heavy vehicle within that crew, it also has passenger vehicle 1008, it has grader 207 attached and a passenger vehicle utility 104. So that really just means a parent-child relationship. So, for servicing purposes or maintenance type purposes, those vehicles are associated with.
They're associated with that group, not necessarily that specific vehicle though, Andrew, is that correct?
Yeah, just associated with that particular asset. But they're keeping in mind they're their own asset in their own right and they have their own asset template. They're on the asset register as their own unique asset. They're just merely associated with this one, that's all.
Okay.
That could be useful for things like, let's say, parks and gardens truck that has a brush cutter and a blower and a chainsaw. You might want to associate those assets to the truck. So when you bring the truck in for service, those assets are identified and can be serviced at the same time, for example.
And we can also find them later on.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. I can't solve that problem for you. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Sorry.
Okay, so registration warranty. You have the option here of, well, you've got multiple options. I think I showed you this at the conference. So you've got your typical truck, 5 years, 200,000 kilometre warranty, bumper to bumper, so to speak. But then you also have the ability to set up individual warranties. So we know most trucks now, most earth-moving stuff, the engine might be 5,000 hours, 5 years. The gearbox might be 10,000 hours, 10 years, etc. They all have different warranty periods. So you'll notice we've set up two here, and these are just fictitious, obviously, but chassis and undercarriage and cooling system. Now, if you go back, I was talking about the maintenance codes and in particular the repair types. So those repair types, chassis and undercarriage cooling system, anytime a mechanic chooses a work order, for example, that's a cooling system work order, it'll bring up a box in the work order with a tick and say this component is under warranty. You need to pay attention. It's likely that this will be paid for by someone else.
Very good.
The other really nice thing I like about this is if you have a grader, you blow a transmission at 5,000 hours, you put a new transmission in, it comes with its own warranty of 2,000 hours. Then you simply set up a warranty item here, which is the warranty starts from 5,000 hours and ends at 7,000 hours. it'll do the same functionality in the background. So quite flexible. I really like that functionality. I do know over the years that we've done a lot of repairs that should have been covered by warranty, for example. Typical sort of purchase and replacement type fields. You have the ability there to allocate whether it has a police permit and any special maintenance notes. You know, is it serviced at the dealer? You know, et cetera, whatever your site does. You also have the ability to, within a work order, particularly in an engine work order, you have the ability to have a questionnaire. And the questionnaire, this one is an oil sample. So what it allows you to do is open that up, and it allows you to record in the background. We did an oil sample on this date. The sample number was this. This was the meter, and this was the action. Now that's in line with Caterpillar type oil sampling. I imagine you'd know those. They use an A, B, C. You know, if you've got a B, it's kind of a warning, and a C, you need to take action. So that allows you to keep a history of those samples. And every time you take one, it's simply engine, transmission, hydraulic, all your typical sample points. We spoke before about so we have two things. We have a request. That's about the customer. So I'm requesting the workshop to do something, fix it, service it, etc. And then once that request then turns into a work order as well. So we have two components to that. The request about the customer, the work order is about the workshop and who does the work. And they're two separate documents, however, they're linked. But like I say, one's about the customer and one's about the workshop. So this is just really a history recording, I guess you would say, of those. And then you've got all your work orders here. So you'll notice this one, work order 717, is associated to request number 1020. And it's an accessories work order. Came in on the 3rd of the 11th. It was to do with accessories, and they added fluid, and it was $26 and $11.30 labour. So, look, quite flexible, and to me, it's the power of those maintenance codes you'll see there. It's a standard way of describing that maintenance. So you can see straight away it's a brake work order, and we adjusted the brakes at 67,000 kilometres. So from that point of view, you don't necessarily have to dig into the work order. You can go into that work order if you choose to, straight into the work order and have a look at the detail, or it'll give you quite a lot of detail just in this summary report.
And you can also go back to find what the request was initially, Andrew?
Absolutely. So you can click on either the request or the work order. They're both linked anyway. So if you go to the request first, within that request, it has the work order as well. So I'll go into this one if you like. So this section that we're looking at, this would have come from the operator. So this has come from Mark Hosking, asset 1020 on 24th of the 10th. The reason that he's allocated that is an operator's report, but they also have the option to choose accident, commission, decommission, etc., etc. They have the option to put a priority in there as well, and also a location. So this one, they've requested the works be done at the workshop, but if they chose in field, it'll then drop down a map, and you can choose the actual location from there. So that's quite a nice function, particularly for the workshop. So if we just close that and go back to workshop, it'll just hide that. The operator can also take, imagine, the grader operator rings, he's out in the field somewhere and says, my battery's dead, or whatever he says. Before you dispatch a mechanic, you can communicate with the operator and say, listen, we don't have the battery details on file. Can you take me a photo, for example? So before you dispatch that mechanic, you can actually know a fair bit about the problem, before they leave. Take a photo where the oil's leaking from, for example. That way it might give you a fair idea of where it's coming from.
Yep.
So this is, like I say, this is about the customer here, and this section's about the workshop. So it's been assigned to Bundaberg Workshop, and we'll go in and we'll find that in a minute. It was expected to start on the 8th of the 12th and expected completion. So the workshop supervisor's filled this out, and the operator at his end can see this information. So he knows the workshop's picked it up, it's in progress, when the expected start is and when the expected completion is. And they can follow the progress of the work order right through by these fields. We'll just go back.
Is there a functionality, just very quickly, Andrew,
Yes.
just back in that section, to suspend the work order for whatever reason?
Yes. Okay. Good question. Let me I'll just remind me, and we'll go back there. I'll just finish on this asset register. So we went through warranty, repair history, asset-specific parts. So this is a listing of parts against this particular asset. There's only 2 set up there, but obviously it's directly connected to the inventory system. So once again, you can set up parts that are asset-specific, consumable parts, service-specific parts, etc. All very flexible. And this is where your fuel receipts will show up. So anytime you do a fuel meter upload, it'll pull out the details for asset 1020 and it'll place them in a grid here. So you'll keep a full history of those fuel meter imports, and you can refer to those at any time. So this is service type. So this is where you set up your service details for this particular asset. And it's really a matter of going through. I'll just click on one of these. This has been set up a little bit sort of generic in nature. So I've set this one up as a heavy vehicle, not, Mack or Isuzu, just generic.
Mm-hmm.
And literally you set it up, you go through and you say, we want to check the coolant, the tyres, and you can add, if I just click on here, it'll bring the whole list up. You can add as many as you want. You can search there. It'll define it down to whatever you want. Service materials, so you can say you want, an SOS kit. You also want, some air conditioning cleaner, whatever you want there. Now these, also within the setup, you can clone this asset here. If you want to use this detail again, but you want to call it an Isuzu, for example, you basically clone this and all you do is change the heading at the top and turn it into Isuzu.
Yeah.
So instead of going through and setting up each individual asset, you can clone each one of these as you go through. Okay, let me just think what else I've got to show you. What I'll do is I'll just go to the side a little bit. Service checks and mappings. This is back into the setup area. I think I missed this when I went through. Okay, I did. So this is in the background. This is all the services that are set up in the background. So if you wanted to, you simply go in here and you say, well, I'm looking for an Iveco. There's an Iveco 1,000-hour or 48-week service. You select that service and you scroll down to the bottom and it'll allow you to then clone that asset. Sorry, it's up here. So if I hit clone, what it'll do is clone that service. You go into the background and simply you can say, well, it's not an ACO, it's now an Isuzu. So you've basically created a whole new service for an Isuzu just by using all that information.
Yeah.
Quite flexible. You can set these up very manufacturer specific or very general, however you work. Probably no right or wrong. It's just how you want to set it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me go back here. So there are your service types. Obviously, you can tell the system for this particular asset, tell me within 15% of its meter interval. So provide a warning or an alert to me that service is coming up at 15% of meter tolerance, or 30 days before it's due. So you can adjust all that, depending on the utilisation of the asset. Daily driver, so any daily driver's check sheets. Sorry about that, I've got a dog barking. Just once, sorry. So daily drivers history, any of those will show up here. So every time one's completed, it'll show up against the asset record. And then the bottom part here is about the GPS. So GPS, Formbird has an optional GPS system. Obviously, if you sign up for it, there's a map and all that GPS data is integrated, and allows you to integrate that data into your business processes from there. So that's an asset. That's a truck. So that's an asset record. Like I said, each asset type is tailored to each individual asset, which I really like. I guess what drove us to set the system up like this is typically my experience has been with asset management systems, bridges and roads, etc. And when you go to the templates to set an asset up, you end up with, say, 20 fields filled in and 40 fields empty, because it's not a fleet-specific system. Yeah. Even probably between a heavy vehicle and a brush cutter, a brush cutter, to describe that asset, is going to have a lot less fields, and that's what we've been able to do here. So it means, particularly when you're on a mobile device, you're not scrolling through empty fields, is really what it's about. Okay, so I'm just mindful of time and you guys. We'll go in and have a look at some work orders, and I'll just run you through the work order process. Sorry about that dog. He's too far away from me to squirt him with water. He's a lovely little dog, mind you, but annoys me at times. Okay, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at a request for asset ID 1020. So this would be what the operator's filled in. He's basically said it's come from an operator's report, it's non-urgent, the asset's operational, and he's requested the service to be done in the workshop. Simply said there's a small leak at the gearbox. Once again, they could take a photo, which would be really helpful to the workshop supervisor, and that's visible to them. So this section is now about the workshop supervisor. So this would have showed up, the work request would show up on the dashboard of the workshop supervisor, and that person has then put in the expected start date, expected completion. Now, we have multiple statuses here, and this probably answers your question, Pat. Now, we've got multiple statuses in here. So we have things like a drop-off status, an in-progress status, a work completed status, and a pickup status. Now, you could argue that we've probably got a couple too many in there, as in the drop-off and the pickup. The reason I've put those in there is that, in my experience, the customer's booked in at 9 o'clock on Wednesday. However, they don't drop the vehicle off until midday, for example. So what that drop-off status allows you to do is date and timestamp when they actually dropped it off. So it's an additional step in the system, but I find it very important, particularly if you've got service level agreements in place. Yeah. So what it does, you've got a full auditable history then of everything that happened on this repair. Similarly, after the work's completed, we have another one which is called pickup. My experience again, we need this asset, we're desperate, got to have it by lunchtime. Workshop pulls out all stops, gets it done, they don't pick it up for 3 days. Do you know what I mean? So rather than having an argument based on, I think this happened and my word, it's now recorded in the system.
Yeah.
So, okay, so to answer your question before about status, so once the status is in progress, as soon as it hits in progress, it means the downtime has started to record in the system. Yeah. And it stops when the work is completed. I think your question was, can we defer a work request? So let's say we had a work request that had 3 work orders underneath. The mechanics completed 2 of those work orders, but the third one was waiting for parts, but the asset's okay to go back to work. Then simply what we would do is click that defer button, and that then stops the downtime clock and brings it up into the workshop supervisor report that just says, hey, we've deferred a work order on this work request. So I'm pretty sure that was your question, wasn't it, Pat?
Yeah, it was along those lines, Andrew. I just, as you mentioned there, where you're waiting for parts, whether that was a suspension type,
Yes.
just so that you can get an idea of then the productivity in the workshop. Is some of those times in, out, in progress and so on can be slightly skewed through, no fault of the workshop that they've got jobs sitting there waiting for parts.
Sure. So look, what I did, I just clicked this one into progress while you were speaking. So what you would do, you'd go through the next status of work complete. At that point, it allows you to say, okay, the work's complete, but we're going to defer this repair and save it. Now, what you need to do is just, it asks you for a question, for a reason, waiting for parts, and then simply you can save that then. So when that comes up in the workshop supervisor's dashboard, it'll come up work request and work order, and it'll tell him that this one's now deferred because it's waiting for parts.
Yeah, okay.
So, I don't know, a couple of days later, let's say the parts have come in, you would go back in here, you would unclick the defer, and you would say it's now in progress. So this is about the work request. It's asking me to re-enter the meter reading because likely the meter readings changed between the first time it came in and the second time. Once again, it's about capturing that clean data. Okay, so at this point, I'm assuming the mechanic's got it. So the mechanic's going to go into the work order. So I guess I'm now seeing the world from the mechanic's point of view.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, the mechanic would open the work order. You'll notice a couple of things. So you can go back to the work request at any time just by simply clicking on here. You can go to the asset at any time by clicking on here. This one has been selected as a gearbox. So what happens in the background is that now that's been selected as gearbox, all the maintenance codes are now tailored to a gearbox. So, okay, so a couple of things. If the gearbox is in warranty, then there would have been a tick show up in that box just saying, hey, this gearbox is in warranty, you need to pay attention. Similarly, if the asset bumper to bumper is in warranty, it'll show up there. It allows you to set an estimated repair hours for how long the repair is going to take. Now, let's say we go through, so the mechanic says, oh, you know what, I think this truck's been in here, I don't know, 3 times in the last month for the same problem. If they click on this box here, it'll show them the full asset history, the repair history. And we did that quite strategically because we didn't want the screen to be muddled with all this information all the time. So the mechanic goes through here and he says, oh, okay, no, I must be mistaken. There's no other gearbox jobs, for example. Just unclick that box and it hides all that detail now. Very important when you're on a tablet or a mobile device. So we went for really nice, clean lines. The information's available when you want it, but it's other than that, we try and keep it nice and tidy. Okay, so a couple of things here. It's been assigned to Andrew Rails, that's the mechanic obviously. So if you wanted to, this is really starting to record time now. I'll just click the time recorder. So that's now actively recording time on this job and I'll click it in progress. So I guess, we're doing the job right now. I'll just scroll down to the bottom. So within the work order also you have the full inventory system and you can filter this grid by parts specific to this asset only, and we've only got 2 parts set up, or specific to a work order type, specific to a gearbox repair, or favourites, or you can clear the filter. So once again, quite flexible in how the system works. Now you've got what we found is some organisations will use the full inventory module. They're probably mature enough to do that, and others won't use that. And you've got a choice. If you don't want to use the inventory module, that's okay. You can capture your parts or the systems like this. So I can add a child document for an additional material, and I can simply say, look, I don't know, I'll call it a wheel alignment. You know, anything else, if you don't want to use the full inventory or you want to add something, you know, like this, you can do that. It cost, you know, $300, for example, and it was one of them, and we just save that. And it'll just add that to the work order cost at the end of the day. You can add multiple of those, so you can add as many of those as you want. So you can use this in conjunction with the inventory system, or you can use it standalone and say, look, instead of individual part numbers, you could say, okay, we used $4,000 worth of parts from Hastings Deering, and you just simply note that here, and then you attach the document, the invoice, sorry. So, look, once again, it's really difficult. I find a lot of sites operate differently. So we've tried to set the system up so that it caters for most sites. Probably no right or wrong. It's just how you guys see the world. You'll notice in the bottom here that the work order is telling me that I've got an active time recorder, which I clicked on at 10:27. So it's just for my information. That also shows up in the workshop supervisor's dashboard just to say who's active and on what jobs. Right, let's pretend now, you know, we've completed the work order. You know what I mean? We've fixed the leak or whatever we've done. So, sorry, before we do that, you'll notice there's 4 boxes here. If this has been assigned to an external supplier rather than an internal mechanic, we give you the option to record the reason why you've assigned it to external. Once again, it's an additional step. Myself, I find it value, but it's not necessary. What this will allow you to do is do some reporting and say, look, you know, we've sent, I don't know, 50 jobs out to external supplier because we didn't have labour available. You know, have we got a shortage of mechanics, for example? Similarly with tooling. You know, we're sending all these jobs out to external suppliers. Do we need to buy a scan tool? It's just another way of capturing information. And, you know, if you're going to go to senior management and say, I need an additional mechanic, you've now got the proof as to why that's happened. Okay, so we're the mechanic. We're finishing this job. We've done the gearbox. So it's going to ask me, what did I do to the gearbox? I'll just say that I repaired it. What was the reason I repaired it? Now, it's only showing these codes which are suitable for repair on a gearbox. They're all tailored codes. So I repaired it because it was leaking, and the repair cause was, well, we can say, design or manufacturer's fault. You can put it. What's interesting I find about the codes is, before we complete a mechanics report, we already know a lot of information about this repair by what we've already done. We know the request number, the repair type, it's a scheduled work order, who did it, and we know that the gearbox had a repair because it was leaking and it was the design manufacturer's fault. So in a lot of cases, you know, a high percentage of cases, the mechanics won't have to do a mechanics report because they've told you everything that you need to know there in a lot of cases. So, you know, my experience has been mechanics, poor spelling, you know, all those types of things are almost eliminated by a lot of work orders simply by using a defined set of codes. You know, we can put something in there. I'll just put fixed leak, whatever level of detail you want to do. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, I took a sample, primary meter, 69.875. The component I sampled was the transmission. And what was the result? So we'll just pretend it's come back. Like I said, applicable, it colour codes it according to the Caterpillar standards. So that section there is optional. It also then asks me another set of questions. So on the gearbox, where was the main defect? Was it the gearbox assembly, in the selectors, the transfer case, or general? I'll just say general. General and, I don't know, in the electronic controls. Okay, so we've now described what we did on the work order. We've got a couple of options now. If we feel we're finished this work order, we can put something in there. I'll just put fixed leak, whatever level of detail you want to do. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here. Did I take an oil sample at the same time? If I did, I have the option of opening that up. Okay, it's asked me a couple of questions here we simply go back and complete the work order, turn off our time recorder and click save. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll show you a couple of things down the bottom now. So we know, first of all, we had additional costs of $300 materials because we did a wheel alignment. And we also know that total labour cost, 6 minutes and 24 seconds. So the total work order cost for that particular one is $307.80. Now, depending on your location again and how your workshops operate, probably no right or wrong, at this point the work order is now completed. However, we've still got an open work request, if you remember. So this would then show up on the workshop supervisor's dashboard and say, hey, Andrew Rails has completed this work order, and it's their option then to review that work order. Depends on how you work, but I like the workshop supervisor to run through a QA process. And that might simply be, so the workshop supervisor would come in here, he would look at it, he can go into the gearbox if he wants and go and have a look at the detail. If he's satisfied with what's happened, then he can simply say, okay, the work's complete, and then save that. So the downtime recorder is now stopped. And, okay, further on down in the day, we can set up an email alert here that says, as soon as that status is work complete, it'll send an email to the allocated officer, if you like. Allocated officer comes in and says, I'm here to pick up my truck. We now change the status to pick up. Okay, that's indicating that obviously they've picked the vehicle up. You have one more status. Now the next status is closed. So this is really reserved for when all your invoices come in, and you find your job is totally complete. It'll say to you, at this point it's asking you, do you want to close it and set all the fields to read only? So at that point, the mechanics and whoever you give privileges to, mechanics in particular, they'll only have read privileges. They can't go into that work order and change any fields. The only person that can do that is either a workshop supervisor or an admin type person.
Yep.
So once again, flexibility just depends on how your site works. Look, I know we're out of time. Have you got any specific questions for me, or do you want me to go over anything? Do you want to have a look at some reports?
Yeah, I'd like to have a look at the report.
Yeah, a couple of reports, perhaps in particular, any exception reports in relation to specifically fuel. I suppose, Andrew, that's an easy one.
Okay, that one's going to be a challenge for me.
Okay, mate. Sorry.
No, it's all good. Just because I don't have any
Fuel
data in there. So, look, I know I've got some good data around March, so I'll run it. This is turnaround time for repair. So this one is about how long did it take your workshop to turn this repair around? This is not the mechanics. How long did they take? How long did this repair take from the time the vehicle was dropped off until the work was completed? And we target look, if you can complete, you're doing very, very well. If you can complete 70% in 24 hours, 20% 24 to 48 hours, and 10% over 48 hours. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on the age of your fleet, your workshops. There's a whole lot of variables in there. But basically, that's just giving me a summary of the different repairs, and it's telling me there's only 5 jobs, 5 in 24 hours and 5 up to 48. And then I can drill through and go to the individual repairs by clicking through on those links. That'll take me straight to the repair. This is repair cause. Okay. This one really, so this is about our maintenance codes. So this one here, so repair types, if you choose it for the month of March, like we've done, for example, probably doesn't make sense at this point, but say cab assembly say hydraulic system. If your hydraulic system was continually at the top of the repair type list every month and accounted for, say, 40 or 50% of your repairs, I'd suggest you need to look a bit deeper. You've got an inherent problem there, someone with your hydraulic system maintenance. Either you're using the wrong oil, or you've got these are indicators as to how you're going, and really, if you had continuously low voltage electrical as your top repair type over a 6-month period, you'd probably look at putting an auto electrician on your staff, for example. So they're really indicators about the type of maintenance. It gives you an indicator of the cause of your repairs. So obviously you want to see plenty of fair wear and tear. You don't want to see too many unfair wear and tears. The repair reason. What was the reason we repaired it? Defective, cracked, chipped. Once again, an indicator, and can tell you a story behind the scenes. If you're continuously seeing one particular repair code at the top of the list and a high percentage, I'd suggest you need to dig a little bit deeper. Work completed, adjust, fabricate, repair. Like I said, there's only limited detail there, and then it goes down into the actual detail of the individual work orders from there.
What about your schedule versus unscheduled maintenance?
Yep, I'll do that one now. Appreciate I'm going fairly fast, but we're sort of running out of time. Yeah. Okay. So it firstly gives you a breakdown by workshop, scheduled versus unscheduled, obviously. There's not a lot of data in there, obviously, but it shows you by workshop, whether that's mobile workshop or actual workshop. Gives you an overall score, so it's telling us overall, from summary from all the workshops, we're achieving 72 and 27 basically. I'd be happy if I could achieve that every week.
They're damn good numbers, Andrew.
Absolutely. So I said, don't pay any attention to the data. And obviously you can then drill down into the actual data again from there. Let's go to direct versus indirect labour. So if you remember, I was talking about direct labour. Is that labour directly attributable to an asset ID? And the indirect labour is any labour that's kind of an overhead type activity. It'll give you a percentage. If you can achieve, in general terms, if you can achieve your mechanic for a period of time, 75% direct labour on the tools, you're doing pretty well. So if they're doing that and completing, within their flat rate repair times, you've got a pretty tidy operation. So it gives an overall, and then it breaks it down by individual employee. So Andrew Rails, 8 direct work orders and 3 indirect, and the percentage. And there's, once again, drill down into your either time recorded document or your work order. And I'll do one more report, and then I'll take you to the a time recorded document or a timesheet. This is interesting. So request export. This allows you to export all your fields from your work requests out to CSV or Excel, so you can manipulate them further. So if you want to do any other reporting, it allows you to export all those fields out. Similarly, we have the same with the work orders. We can export all the fields out of that are in the work orders, and then you can further manipulate them in Excel if you want to. Okay, I'll run the downtime report. I don't know if there's a lot of data in there, but let's see how we go. Okay, so we've set this up to be, tell us if the assets achieve 98% availability. That figure can be adjusted depending on, your operation. And what it does is it lists every asset, and I'll just find one. Okay, so this one, plant number 1020, on the 16th of the 8th, had 35 minutes downtime. So it just goes through and it says how many minutes expected availability and how many minutes downtime were there, and did you meet your target of 98%, essentially. There's not a lot of data in there, so it's probably difficult to get a fair understanding. But that one there, it's just saying that there was 154,000 minutes available, and it was down for 29,000 minutes. Okay, I'll just take you to a time card. This here is a listing of all time card entries. If you remember when I clicked on the time recorder document, and I'll just open that one up. Okay, do you guys record any of your time electronically now at all?
Not electronically.
Okay, so it's a really interesting one because there's a thought out there that you sign up to electronic and your whole world changes and you've reached nirvana. And in some ways that is true, but there's a few tricky ones. So if you picture the mechanics all get to work at 5 to 7, they log on, they start their time recorders at 7 o'clock, that's all good. But at the end of the day, they all go home and don't turn their time recorders off, okay? So then all of a sudden, all those time recorders are actively recording time when they're at home. So when we log in as a supervisor, we have another button here, which is a supervisor update. It allows to basically override the system, and the workshop supervisor can go in and adjust their time recorder. So if they happen to leave it on, the supervisor's got that veto power to go in and adjust it at any time. That's a really important one. Okay, and then we can do a timesheet report for an individual. So I will do me, and I'll do it in March again. Okay, so this is about, obviously, Andrew Rails in March. And this is telling me that on the 9th of the 3rd at 10:51, I clicked my time recorder on for a total of 27.61 minutes for asset ID 2496 and work order 813. Probably the one you want to pay attention to is this is an internal task. So on the 20th of the 3rd, I clicked my time recorder on at 2 minutes past 9 and clicked it off at 9:51, and that was because I was acting supervisor. So what the system does, it has the capability of recording every minute of the day, particularly for your workshop staff. You can also record all your fleet admin staff if you want to set them up to do, while they're collecting accident data or infringements or all that sort of stuff. Got that ability. Have you got another 5 minutes?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over now to this is more the enterprise system. So we're in a different system now. You'll notice a couple of things. You'll notice a lot more buttons. So training. So this allows a couple of things. It allows you to set up a training event. Okay, we've sent all the mechanics to forklift training, and they can log on and record their time, place, date, stamp, all that stuff. And then it can say, that training is valid for, say, 12 months. Now, if the next day a mechanic goes to the workshop forklift, he does his daily driver's check sheet, and he doesn't have a valid competency or training in the background, it'll send an alert to the workshop supervisor to say, hey, this guy's just done a daily driver's check sheet and his license is invalid. So similarly, if someone creates a work request for an asset, and they don't have the right training or competency module, it'll send an email to their supervisor and say, hey, this guy is operating this machine without the right competency. Do you guys use the IPWA whole of life costing tool?
No, I haven't at the moment.
Okay, so look, that's part of your subscription. I guess the point is Mark from Formbird supplies that to IPWA in the background, and we have that embedded into the system. So that'll do all your whole of life costing and your best value tender analysis, all done within the system. It also has the AVL or the GPS module. So all your asset tracking, idle time, geofence, all that type of stuff is all in the enterprise system. A couple I do want to show you is we've set up the system to have multiple types of plant hire rates. Okay, and you can an asset can either be permanently assigned, it could come out of the hire store. If you remember, it can be assigned many ways. And this is an optional, you don't have to take this option up, but this is about this within the system. It knows all your depreciation and your overhead charges. So if you have a grader, it'll say, okay, I'm going to charge you every month, and in this example, it's a truck, $1,463.19. That's your fixed cost. Every month you're going to be charged that. Then every time you fill up with fuel or use labour or materials or any additional costs, we're going to bill you that separately. So what that enables you to do is really only recover the true costs of running that asset. It's a system that's very popular in the United States, and certainly, trying to predict the plant hire rates and being over and unders. This way of doing it actually guarantees you only recover what the asset costs you. So that is one way that we can do the plant hire rates. The other way, we can simply set up your typical hourly rate, daily rate, weekly rate, or annual hire rate. Also with your budgeted timesheet hours, okay? That can be used for a permanently assigned asset, or that can be used for assets that are assigned to the hire store and just come in and out at will. This one I really want to show you. So this is did you guys see the risk-based replacement methodology at the conference?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so this is really about, it's probably an alternative way of predicting your plant replacement program. And it's really a risk-based approach. So there's 5 major categories and then 18 sort of separate questions. Obviously, it scores each one of those, your primary meter against your benchmark meter, same with your age, and then it asks questions and it weights these questions according to risk and you give them a score. So if the asset is parked outside all of its life, it obviously rates that and gives it a score. It says the nature of the work. So is it critical to your business, or is it just core business, or is it just aesthetics? What is the criticality to your business? Does it require a specific driver's license? Is the task that it performs mandated by regulation? Once again, these are all weighted according to risk. Is there any other alternatives available? So it's a critical asset and there's no alternatives available, so obviously you get a higher score. How many times a year is the vehicle washed, particularly in regards to body condition? What's the degree of corrosion on the asset? As far as new model assets go, is there any new models on the market that have a specific green component that's attractive to your business? It also asks you, what are the estimated future repair costs in the next 12 months? What do you think this is going to cost? Evolution of technology. Is there any newer models on the market that combine multiple tasks in the one vehicle, for example? And obviously it ranks that and scores that. Are repair parts still available or no longer available? And it also does a couple other things. So it asks a question about utilisation. It asks how many times the asset is used per year. How we record that data is we count how many driver's check sheets it has. So if you remember, the operator logs in and does that, we take that asset's going to be utilised for the day. So what we found with this replacement, this risk-based methodology, is it is a great tool, but there's a fair bit of data collect. So we've tried to automate the collection of that data as much as possible. It'll also look at your 2-year cost repair trend, and that gets all that data from your work orders. So as you complete your work orders, it takes that into account and calculates. And I'll just take you to, this really now is a scorecard for one asset, the one we were just looking at. So it tells me all your typical financial data. and it scores. Each of these, the vehicle condition is scored, utilisation is scored, operations are scored. It also records downtime and weights that downtime. And what it does at the end of the day, it gives you a score. And if it scores 0 to 55, so once it scores all those things, it normalises that score back to 100 points. And it says if you're 0 to 55 points, we recommend that you retain it. If it's 55 to 65 points, you need to start preparing for replacement. And if it's 65 to 100 points, we recommend you replace that asset. So it's just a different way of looking at plant replacement. I know that, certainly optimum replacement point is very valid, but a lot of councils that I deal with just don't have the funds to replace by those optimum replacement points. So yeah, that's probably it, unless you've got any questions.